My name is Marco Benedetti, and for the past 3 years, I have worked in the Vatican's Crypt division. Most people don't know we exist. The tourists who visit St. Peter's Basilica walk right over our heads, taking pictures and buying souvenirs, completely unaware of the vast network of chambers beneath their feet. The Vatican employs exactly 12 people in our division. We maintain the underground burial sites, catalog religious artifacts, and ensure the structural integrity of the ancient chambers. It sounds boring, but boring is exactly what we want it to be. On my first day, Monsignor Toretti handed me a laminated card with 5 rules printed in both Italian and Latin. He told me to memorize them, carry the card always, and never, under any circumstances, break them. Rule 1, never enter the crypts alone. Rule 2, always carry blessed candles. Rule 3, report any temperature changes immediately. Rule 4, do not touch unmarked containers. Rule 5, exit before midnight. These rules exist for practical reasons, Monsignor Toretti explained in his careful English. He was a thin man with silver hair and hands that shook slightly when he held his coffee cup. The crypts are old, very old. Some chambers date back to the 1st century. We follow procedures to keep everyone safe. I nodded and put the card in my wallet. At the time, I thought the rules seemed reasonable. Underground areas can be dangerous. Cave-ins happen. Gas pockets form. People get lost in maze-like tunnels. The blessed candles made sense too. They burn longer than regular candles and provide better light. The midnight rule seemed strange, but Monsignor Toretti explained that the Vatican closes its doors at 11:30. Security does sweeps after midnight. If we stayed past closing, we would need special permission and escorts. Simpler to just finish work before then. My partner was Dr. Isabella Marchetti, a woman in her 50s who had worked in the Crypt division for 15 years. She knew every tunnel, every chamber, every artifact in our care. When she spoke about the underground areas, her voice carried the same reverence other people reserved for discussing the Sistine Chapel. "The crypts tell the story of our faith," she said during our first descent together. We walked down a narrow stone staircase lit by electric bulbs installed sometime in the 1960s. Every level represents a different era. The deeper you go, the further back in time you travel. The air grew cooler as we descended. I could smell dust and old stone, along with something else, a scent like dried flowers mixed with old books. Dr. Marchetti explained that this was normal. The crypts held thousands of artifacts made from organic materials. Wood, cloth, leather, and paper all contributed to the unique atmosphere below ground. We reached the first level, which housed tombs from the Renaissance period. Elaborate marble sculptures lined the walls. Cardinals and wealthy benefactors rested in carved sarcophagi, decorated with angels and religious symbols. Electric lighting had been installed here, but Dr. Marchetti still carried 2 blessed candles in a leather pouch on her belt. "Why do we still need the candles if there's electricity?" I asked. "Backup lighting," she replied. "The electrical system down here is old. Power outages happen more often than you might think." We spent the morning cataloging a collection of medieval religious texts that had been moved from a chamber showing signs of water damage. The books were written in Latin, with illuminated letters painted in gold and deep blue ink. Some pages depicted saints performing miracles. Others showed biblical scenes rendered in exquisite detail. Dr. Marchetti handled each book with cotton gloves, checking for signs of deterioration. She made notes in a thick ledger, recording the condition of each item. Her handwriting was neat and precise, the kind developed through years of careful documentation. "How often do you find new things down here?" I asked while helping her photograph a page showing St. Sebastian. "More often than you would expect," she said. "The Vatican has been collecting artifacts for 2,000 years. Some items get stored and forgotten. Others are donated and never properly cataloged. We are always discovering pieces of history." As we worked, I became aware of the silence surrounding us. The thick stone walls blocked all sound from the world above. No traffic noise, no voices, no machinery. Just the soft scratching of Dr. Marchetti's pen and the occasional whisper of turning pages. After lunch, we descended to the second level. Here, the electric lighting became more sporadic. Long stretches of corridor remained dark between widely spaced bulbs. The architecture changed too. The Renaissance marble gave way to rougher stonework from medieval times. This level requires more caution, Dr. Marchetti explained as we walked. Some chambers have structural issues. We mark unsafe areas with red tape, but always watch where you step. The medieval tombs were simpler than those above. Stone slabs marked with carved crosses and Latin inscriptions. Some bore only dates and names. Others included longer epitaphs describing the deceased's service to the church. We were checking the humidity levels in a storage chamber when I noticed something odd. The thermometer on the wall read 18 degrees Celsius, but my breath was becoming visible in small puffs. "Dr. Marchetti," I said, "should I be able to see my breath?" She looked up from her clipboard and studied my face carefully. Then she pulled out a small digital thermometer and took a reading from the air near where I stood. 14 degrees, she said, frowning. That's 7 degrees colder than the wall gauge shows. She immediately pulled out her radio and contacted the surface. "Control, this is Dr. Marchetti on level 2. We have a temperature discrepancy in storage chamber 12. Wall gauge shows 18, but local reading is 14 degrees. The radio crackled. "Copy that, Dr. Marchetti. Please exit the chamber immediately and report to the monitoring station." We gathered our equipment and left the chamber. As we walked toward the staircase, I felt the air gradually warming back to normal temperature. By the time we reached the monitoring station on level 1, my breath was no longer visible. Monsignor Toretti met us at the monitoring station. He listened to Dr. Marchetti's report while studying readings from various electronic instruments mounted on the wall. "Cold spots can indicate airflow issues," he explained. "Sometimes blocked ventilation causes temperature variations. We will send a maintenance team to check the chamber tomorrow." He made notes in a thick logbook and asked us to avoid storage chamber 12 until further notice. Red tape would be placed across the entrance. The rest of the afternoon passed normally. We completed our catalog work on level 1 and returned to the surface just after 5 o'clock. As we climbed the stairs toward ground level, I felt relieved to hear normal sounds again. Footsteps, voices, the distant hum of modern life. Dr. Marchetti walked me to the employee exit near the Vatican post office. The late afternoon sun felt warm on my face after hours in the cool underground chambers. "You did well today," she said, following the temperature reporting rule immediately. Many new employees hesitate to speak up about things they notice. "It seemed important," I replied. "Everything is important down there," she said. "The rules exist because previous workers learned from experience. We follow them because they keep us safe." That evening, I researched the Vatican's underground areas online. Most websites mentioned the famous Scavi tour, which takes visitors to see St. Peter's tomb beneath the main altar. Some academic papers discussed archaeological discoveries made during construction projects, but I found very little information about the Crypt division itself. No job postings, no organizational charts, no news articles about our work. It was as if the 12 of us existed in a space between the official Vatican and the outside world. The next morning, I arrived early and found Monsignor Toretti in the prep room, organizing equipment for the day's work. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "The maintenance team inspected storage chamber 12 last night," he said without preamble. "They found no blocked vents, no airflow issues, no equipment malfunctions. So what caused the temperature drop?" "Unknown," he replied, handing me a clipboard with the day's assignments. "The chamber remains off limits until further evaluation." Dr. Marchetti arrived a few minutes later, carrying her usual leather satchel of supplies. She greeted us both and reviewed the day's schedule. We would be working on level 3 for the first time since I had started. "Level 3 requires extra preparation," she explained as we gathered our equipment. Lighting is limited to essential areas only. We will depend more heavily on portable illumination. She handed me a battery-powered lantern and checked that I had fresh batteries for my flashlight. The blessed candles went into her leather pouch as always. Level 3 lay deeper than I had imagined. The staircase continued down for what felt like 10 stories, though Dr. Marchetti explained that the levels were not evenly spaced. Some areas had higher ceilings to accommodate larger tombs or storage needs. The air grew noticeably cooler as we descended. By the time we reached level 3, I estimated the temperature at about 12 degrees Celsius. Not uncomfortable, but definitely chilly. The architecture here was different again. Rougher stonework, lower ceilings, narrower corridors. This was clearly much older construction. Instead of electric bulbs, battery-powered emergency lights had been installed at key intersections. Most of the area remained in darkness. This level dates from the early medieval period, Dr. Marchetti explained as we walked. Some sections may be even older. We are still mapping and cataloging everything down here. Our assignment involved checking on a collection of ancient manuscripts that had been moved to level 3 for climate reasons. The cooler, more stable temperature helped preserve very old organic materials. We made our way through several corridors, using our lanterns to navigate. The beam of my light revealed stone walls covered with Latin inscriptions. Some were carved directly into the rock. Others had been painted in faded red letters. "What do the inscriptions say?" I asked. Dr. Marchetti stopped and directed her light toward a section of wall. Most are prayers or biblical verses. Some mark burial sites. A few indicate dates when chambers were sealed or opened. We reached a heavy wooden door marked with a brass plaque reading, "Manuscript storage, authorization required." Dr. Marchetti produced a key from her satchel and unlocked the door. The storage room was larger than I expected, with tall shelves lining the walls. Climate control equipment hummed quietly in one corner. The manuscripts were stored in acid-free boxes, each labeled with identification numbers and brief descriptions. Dr. Marchetti consulted her clipboard and began pulling specific boxes for inspection. I helped carry them to a table where she could examine each item under proper lighting. The manuscripts were incredibly old. Some appeared to be written on animal skin rather than paper. The Latin text was hand-lettered in various styles, depending on the time period and regional traditions. A few included small illustrations in the margins. "This one is particularly interesting," Dr. Marchetti said, opening a box containing several bound pages. "It appears to be a collection of prayers written by monks in the 8th century. I looked over her shoulder as she carefully turned the pages. The Latin words meant nothing to me, but the craftsmanship was remarkable. Each letter had been formed with careful attention to detail. As she worked, I became aware of a sound I had not noticed before. A very faint rhythmic noise, almost like someone tapping gently on stone. It seemed to come from somewhere beyond the storage room. "Dr. Marchetti," I said quietly, "do you hear that tapping sound?" She stopped examining the manuscript and listened carefully. After several seconds, she shook her head. "I don't hear anything unusual. What does it sound like to you?" I listened again, but the sound had stopped. It was like someone tapping on the wall, very soft but regular, like a rhythm. "Sound travels strangely down here," she said. "Vibrations from the surface can reach us in unexpected ways. Construction work, heavy vehicles, even large groups of tourists can create noises that seem to come from inside the crypts." She returned to her work, but I remained distracted. The silence in the manuscript room felt different now, more complete, as if the space was actively absorbing sound rather than simply being quiet. We spent 2 hours examining manuscripts and updating their condition reports. Everything appeared to be in good order. The climate control system was maintaining proper temperature and humidity levels. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Marchetti locked the storage room and made notes in her logbook. We gathered our equipment and began the walk back through the corridors of level 3. Halfway to the staircase, my lantern began to flicker. The beam grew dimmer, then brighter, then dimmed again. "Battery issue," I said, tapping the side of the lantern. "Use your flashlight," Dr. Marchetti replied. "We can replace the lantern batteries when we reach level 1. I switched to my flashlight, which provided a narrower but more focused beam. As we continued walking, I noticed that our footsteps sounded different. Instead of the sharp echoes I expected from stone corridors, our steps seemed muffled, as if the walls were absorbing the sound. Dr. Marchetti walked ahead of me, her lantern casting a steady circle of light. Every few steps, she would pause to check our location against landmarks she had memorized. A particular inscription, a distinctive archway, a section where the ceiling height changed. "Are we taking the same route back?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "The layout down here can be confusing, but I know these corridors well." Despite her confidence, something felt different about our return journey. The walls seemed closer together, though I knew that was impossible. The ceiling appeared lower, though my flashlight beam reached the stone above us, just as it had before. I tried to focus on practical things, count my steps, memorize the route, pay attention to Dr. Marchetti's navigation techniques, but a growing sense of unease made concentration difficult. After what felt like 20 minutes of walking, we should have reached the staircase to level 2. Instead, we found ourselves in a circular chamber I did not remember passing through on our way to the manuscript storage room. Dr. Marchetti stopped and consulted a hand-drawn map from her satchel. She studied it by lantern light, comparing our surroundings to the details marked on paper. "This chamber is not on my route," she said slowly. "We must have taken a wrong turn. Should we backtrack?" "Yes," she decided. "We will return to the last landmark I recognized and choose a different corridor." We turned around and began walking back the way we had come, but after 10 minutes we reached another circular chamber that looked identical to the first one. Same size, same stonework, same archways leading off in multiple directions. Dr. Marchetti checked her map again, her expression growing concerned. "This should not be possible. I have walked these routes hundreds of times." I looked at my watch. 6:30. We had been on level 3 for nearly 4 hours, much longer than planned. According to our original schedule, we should have been back on the surface by now. "Maybe we should radio for guidance," I suggested. Dr. Marchetti pulled out her radio and pressed the transmit button. Static filled the chamber, but no voice responded to her call. "Control, this is Dr. Marchetti on level 3. Please respond." More static. She adjusted the frequency and tried again. "Control, this is Dr. Marchetti. We need navigation assistance on level 3. Nothing but electronic noise. "The radio range may be limited this far down," she said, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty I had not heard before. We tried several more corridors, each leading to chambers that seemed familiar but did not match Dr. Marchetti's map. The stone walls all looked similar in our limited light. The inscriptions blended together. Every archway led to another corridor that looked like the one we had just left. By 7 o'clock, we had been walking for over an hour without finding the staircase to level 2. Dr. Marchetti sat down on a stone ledge and spread her map on her knees. "Something is not right," she admitted. "I know this level. I helped create this map. We should not be having difficulty finding our way back." I sat beside her and studied the hand-drawn diagram. It showed a relatively simple layout. Several main corridors connected by smaller passages, with the manuscript storage room clearly marked in relation to the staircase. "Could there be passages that are not on the map?" I asked. "Possible," she said. "We are still discovering new areas, but I have never encountered chambers like these before." The circular rooms we kept finding were not marked on her diagram at all. According to the map, this section of level 3 should contain only rectangular storage chambers and connecting corridors. "What do we do?" Dr. Marchetti folded her map and stood up. "We follow procedure. Keep moving until we find the staircase or until we can establish radio contact. The alternative is to wait for the night security team to notice we are missing. When would that happen? When we fail to sign out by 8 o'clock, someone will come looking for us. We resumed walking, choosing corridors systematically. Left turns first, then right turns, if left turns led to dead ends. Dr. Marchetti marked our route with small pieces of chalk, creating breadcrumbs to prevent us from walking in circles. At 7:45, we found something new. A corridor that sloped downward at a gentle angle. Dr. Marchetti consulted her map and shook her head. "This passage is not documented," she said. "Level 3 should be the lowest accessible level." Accessible? There are older chambers below us, but they were sealed decades ago due to structural concerns. This corridor should not exist. Despite her reservations, the sloping passage represented our first new option in hours of searching. We decided to follow it for a short distance to see where it led. The corridor continued downward for about 50 meters before ending at a heavy stone door. Unlike the wooden door to the manuscript storage room, this barrier appeared to be carved from a single piece of rock. Latin words were inscribed across its surface. Dr. Marchetti directed her lantern toward the inscription and read it aloud. "What does that mean? What is once sealed should remain forever sealed." She checked her watch. 7:55. "We need to return to level 3 immediately," she said. "We can report this discovery tomorrow, but right now our priority is reaching the surface before the security team begins searching for us." We turned and walked quickly back up the sloping corridor. By the time we reached level 3, it was exactly 8 o'clock. Dr. Marchetti's radio crackled to life. "Dr. Marchetti, this is Control. Please report your location." "Control, we are on level 3 returning to the surface. We encountered navigation difficulties and lost track of time." "Copy that. Please proceed to the main staircase immediately. Security escort is standing by." We followed the radio guidance back through the corridors of level 3. Within 10 minutes, we reached the familiar staircase to level 2. The route that had eluded us for hours was suddenly clear and obvious. As we climbed toward the surface, Dr. Marchetti was quiet. She seemed troubled by our experience, though she offered no explanation for what had happened. Monsignor Toretti met us at the level 1 monitoring station. He looked relieved to see us, but his expression grew serious as Dr. Marchetti described our difficulties finding the return route. "You were walking in circles for over an hour?" he asked. "It appeared that way, yes. We found repeated chambers that looked identical, but should not exist according to our maps." Monsignor Toretti made notes in his logbook and asked several detailed questions about our exact route and the timing of events. He seemed particularly interested in the sloping corridor and the sealed stone door. "You will not return to level 3 until we complete a full review," he decided. "Tomorrow you will work on level 1 only." As we prepared to leave for the day, Dr. Marchetti pulled me aside. "What happened down there was unusual," she said quietly. "In 15 years, I have never become lost on any level of the crypts. Could there have been some kind of equipment malfunction? Something affecting our perception?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want you to understand something important. The rules we follow exist for good reasons. Tonight we stayed past our normal departure time. We continued working when we should have returned to the surface. But we were only following the assignment schedule." "The schedule assumes normal conditions," she said. "When conditions become abnormal, the rules take priority over any schedule." I thought about this as I walked home through the streets of Rome. The familiar sounds of traffic and conversation felt reassuring after hours of underground silence. But I could not shake the memory of those identical circular chambers, or the feeling that level 3 had somehow rearranged itself while we worked in the manuscript storage room. That night, I researched Latin phrases online and confirmed Dr. Marchetti's translation of the inscription on the sealed door. "What is once sealed should remain forever sealed." I found similar phrases in historical documents related to medieval burial practices and religious ceremonies. But I also found something else. A brief mention in a scholarly article about Vatican archaeology referred to restricted access levels beneath the documented crypt system. The article noted that some areas had been sealed following incidents involving staff disorientation and safety concerns. The article was written in 1987, 25 years before I joined the Crypt division. I wondered if other employees had experienced navigation difficulties on Level 3. I wondered if the rules had been revised based on those earlier incidents. Most of all, I wondered what lay behind that sealed stone door, and why someone had felt the need to inscribe a warning about keeping it closed. The next morning, I arrived at the Vatican to find Dr. Marchetti already in the prep room, studying architectural drawings spread across a large table. She looked up as I entered, her expression serious. "I spent the evening reviewing historical records," she said without greeting. Level 3 was partially sealed in 1987 following what the reports describe as structural instabilities and staff safety incidents. What kind of safety incidents? The records are not specific. 3 different teams reported becoming lost in areas that should have been familiar. 2 workers were hospitalized for what was termed acute disorientation. The affected sections were sealed and marked off limits. She pointed to several areas on the architectural drawings marked with red ink. These chambers were closed permanently, but according to the maps, we were walking through some of those sealed areas yesterday. Could the seals have been removed? Not without authorization from the highest levels of Vatican administration, and there would be documentation of such decisions. Monsignor Toretti entered the prep room carrying a thick folder of documents. He set the folder on the table and looked at both of us carefully. "I have been reviewing the incident reports from 1987, he said, "and comparing them to your experience yesterday. There are concerning similarities." He opened the folder and pulled out several typed pages. The paper was yellowed with age, and the text appeared to have been produced on an old typewriter. The first incident occurred in June 1987. 2 maintenance workers reported finding corridors that did not appear on any maps. They described walking in circles for several hours before finding their way back to familiar areas. "Like what happened to us," I said. The second incident was more serious. A team of 3 archaeologists became lost on Level 3 for nearly 8 hours. When they were finally located, they reported finding chambers that contained artifacts not included in any Vatican inventory. Dr. Marchetti leaned forward. "What kind of artifacts?" The reports described stone tablets with inscriptions in languages that could not be identified, containers made from materials that appeared to be organic but could not be classified, and architectural features that seemed inconsistent with known construction techniques from any historical period. Monsignor Toretti turned to the next page in the folder. The third incident resulted in the decision to seal Level 3 permanently. A single researcher, working alone despite regulations, was found unconscious near what he described as a stone door bearing Latin warnings. "The door we found yesterday," I said. "Possibly the same one, yes." The researcher recovered physically, but reported experiencing vivid hallucinations and persistent disorientation for several weeks afterward. Dr. Marchetti studied the architectural drawings. If Level 3 was sealed in 1987, how were we able to access it yesterday? And why were we assigned to work there? Monsignor Toretti closed the folder. "Those are excellent questions that I cannot answer. According to our current records, Level 3 has been designated as an active work area for the past 6 months, but I can find no documentation authorizing the reopening of the sealed sections." He stood up and walked to the window overlooking St. Peter's Square. Tourists were already gathering for the morning, cameras ready, guidebooks in hand. "The situation requires investigation by higher authorities," he continued. "Until that investigation is complete, both of you are reassigned to surface duties only." "What kind of surface duties?" Dr. Marchetti asked. "Cataloging and maintenance work in the main basilica. You will assist with tourist management and artifact preservation in the public areas." I felt relief at avoiding another descent into the crypts. But Dr. Marchetti seemed disappointed. She had spent 15 years working underground, developing expertise in areas most people never saw. "For how long?" she asked. "Until further notice." We spent the next week working in St. Peter's Basilica itself. After days in underground chambers, the vast open space felt impossibly large. Sunlight streamed through massive windows, and the constant flow of visitors provided a reassuring sense of normal life. Our duties involved monitoring the condition of artworks and architectural features that were exposed to daily wear from thousands of tourists. We checked for signs of damage, measured humidity levels, and documented any changes in the condition of irreplaceable masterpieces. The work was interesting, but I found myself thinking frequently about our experience on Level 3. The circular chambers that appeared and disappeared, the sealed door with its Latin warning, the feeling that the layout of corridors was somehow shifting around us. Dr. Marchetti seemed equally distracted. She performed her duties competently, but I caught her staring thoughtfully at nothing, clearly lost in consideration of unexplained events. On Friday afternoon, as we completed our weekly reports, she made a decision. "I want to research the history of the underground areas more thoroughly," she said. "The Vatican archives contain records going back centuries. If there have been other incidents like ours, there should be documentation. Are we allowed access to those archives?" As Vatican employees working on historical preservation, we can request research access for legitimate purposes. She filled out the necessary forms and submitted them to the appropriate department. Within 2 hours, we received approval to access specific sections of the archives related to the underground areas beneath St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican Secret Archives occupy a modern building connected to the main library complex. Despite the name, the archives are not actually secret. The Latin word secretum simply means private or personal, referring to the Pope's private archives. We presented our credentials to the staff librarian, who directed us to a reading room equipped with computers for searching catalog databases. Dr. Marchetti proved skilled at navigating the complex filing systems used to organize centuries of accumulated documents. She started by searching for references to construction projects beneath the basilica. The results included hundreds of documents spanning 2,000 years of building and renovation work. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry dated 1978. Archaeological survey of sub-basement areas prior to climate control installation. We requested the document, which arrived after about 30 minutes. The archaeological survey was written in Italian and included detailed drawings of underground chambers and corridors. "This matches the layout of levels 1 and 2, Dr. Marchetti observed, comparing the drawings to her handmade maps. "But look at this notation." She pointed to a section of the survey marked with unusual symbols. A note in Italian explained that these areas had been deemed unsuitable for regular access due to environmental concerns. Environmental concerns? The text mentions temperature fluctuations, structural irregularities, and what it describes as atmospheric disturbances that may affect worker safety. We continued searching and found several more documents related to the underground areas. A maintenance report from 1983 described equipment malfunctions and navigation difficulties experienced by repair teams. A safety assessment from 1985 recommended restricted access protocols for sublevel areas showing signs of geological instability. But the most interesting document was a handwritten report dated 1962, authored by a Vatican archaeologist named Father Giuseppe Toretti. "Toretti," I said. "Any relation to Monsignor Toretti?" "Possibly his father or uncle," Dr. Marchetti replied. "Italian families often work in the same institutions for generations." Father Giuseppe's report described an expedition to map previously unknown chambers beneath Level 3. His team had discovered a series of rooms and corridors that appeared to be much older than the medieval construction above them. "The architecture suggests pre-Christian origin," he wrote. Stonework techniques consistent with Roman construction from the 1st or 2nd century. However, some features appear inconsistent with documented building methods from any known historical period. The report included sketches of inscriptions found in these deeper chambers. Most were in Latin, but some appeared to be in scripts that Father Giuseppe could not identify. Of particular concern, the report continued, are areas where the team experienced disorientation and time distortion. Several members reported feeling that hours had passed when chronometers indicated only minutes had elapsed. Others described the opposite sensation. Dr. Marchetti and I looked at each other. Our experience of walking for hours in circles while searching for the staircase suddenly seemed less unique. Father Giuseppe's report concluded with a strong recommendation that the deeper chambers be sealed and marked off limits. He noted that some locations appear to have adverse effects on human psychology and perception. The final page contained a hand-drawn map of the areas his team had explored. It showed the sloping corridor we had found, leading to what he labeled as Chamber Alpha, Primary Containment. That must be the sealed door, I said. And look at this. Dr. Marchetti pointed to a notation next to the chamber. Multiple containment systems installed 1962, blessed by His Holiness, not to be disturbed. We requested additional documents related to Father Giuseppe's work, but were told that further materials were classified at a level above our access authorization. As we prepared to leave the archives, Dr. Marchetti made copies of the documents we had been allowed to examine. She seemed energized by the research, as if solving historical puzzles helped her process our own unusual experience. This explains much, she said as we walked back toward the main basilica. The areas we accessed on level 3 were supposed to be sealed. Something has gone wrong with the containment systems installed in 1962. What do you think is actually down there? I don't know, she admitted. But clearly previous generations of Vatican workers encountered something that required permanent isolation. That evening, I called my sister Maria in Milan to discuss a completely unrelated family matter. But as we talked, I found myself describing my new job at the Vatican. You work in crypts? She asked. That sounds frightening. It's mostly just maintenance and cataloging, I said. Very routine. But you said there are rules you have to follow. What happens if you break them? I thought about this question for a long time after ending the call. What would happen if someone broke the 5 rules we had memorized? Never enter alone, always carry blessed candles, report temperature changes, don't touch unmarked containers, exit before midnight. We had violated the midnight rule, staying underground well past our intended departure time. And we had experienced navigation difficulties that previous workers had encountered in the same areas. Were the other rules equally important? What would happen if someone entered the crypts alone? What was the significance of the blessed candles? Why were unmarked containers dangerous? Over the weekend, I researched Catholic traditions related to blessed candles and underground spaces. I learned that blessed candles were believed to provide spiritual protection in addition to physical illumination. Some traditions held that blessed objects could ward off negative influences or supernatural threats. But the Vatican Crypt Division was a scientific operation, focused on historical preservation and archaeological research. Why would such an organization rely on blessed candles unless there were practical reasons beyond religious tradition? On Monday morning, Dr. Marchetti arrived at work with additional research materials. She had spent the weekend reading about geological phenomena that could cause disorientation and perceptual disturbances. Some underground areas can develop what geologists call anomalous magnetic fields, she explained. These fields can affect human balance and spatial perception, causing people to become lost even in familiar spaces. That could explain our experience on level 3. Partially, yes. But it doesn't explain why the affected areas were sealed rather than simply marked as hazardous. If the problem were purely geological, it could be managed with proper equipment and procedures. Monsignor Toretti called us into his office to discuss our research findings. He listened carefully as Dr. Marchetti described the documents we had discovered in the archives. "You have uncovered information that confirms my concerns," he said, after she finished. "The situation on Level 3 represents a serious safety issue that requires immediate attention." "What kind of attention?" "I have requested a full investigation by specialists from Vatican Security and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Until that investigation is complete, all access to Level 3 remains suspended." He paused and looked at both of us seriously. "I need you to understand that some information related to Vatican operations is classified for good reasons. Your research has been helpful, but there are aspects of this situation that extend beyond your authorization level." "Are we in any kind of trouble?" I asked. "No," he replied. "But I need your commitment that you will not attempt to access Level 3 independently, regardless of what you may have learned from your research." We both agreed to this condition. Monsignor Toretti seemed satisfied with our response, but I sensed that he was not telling us everything he knew about the situation. For the next 2 weeks, we continued working in the main basilica. The routine was pleasant, and I began to appreciate the artistic and historical treasures that most tourists simply rushed past. But on a Thursday afternoon, while we were checking humidity levels near Michelangelo's Pietà, Dr. Marchetti received an urgent radio message. "Dr. Marchetti, please report to the prep room immediately." We hurried back to the Crypt division offices, where we found Monsignor Toretti in an agitated state. He was reviewing several documents and speaking rapidly in Italian to someone on the telephone. When he finished the call, he turned to us with a grim expression. "The investigation team discovered that the seals on Level 3 have been systematically compromised," he said. "Someone has been accessing the restricted areas regularly over the past several months. Who? We don't know yet, but security cameras installed this week recorded movement in chambers that should be completely sealed." He showed us photographs taken by the investigation team. The images showed the sloping corridor we had found, but the sealed stone door at the end was standing open. "The door was forced," Monsignor Toretti explained. "Heavy equipment was used to break the locking mechanisms installed in 1962. Dr. Marchetti studied the photographs. "When did this happen?" "The cameras were installed on Monday. The door was already open when the system came online. So someone has been accessing whatever is behind that door for an unknown period of time." "Exactly. And now we need to determine what they were doing down there." Monsignor Toretti handed us equipment lists and safety gear. "You will accompany the investigation team to Level 3 tomorrow morning. Your familiarity with the layout makes you valuable guides." "Are we qualified for an investigation of this type?" I asked. "The team leader is Father Sebastian Cavalieri from Vatican Security. He has experience with sensitive archaeological situations. Your role will be to provide navigation assistance and historical context." That evening, I had difficulty sleeping. The idea of returning to Level 3, especially to areas beyond the open stone door, felt deeply unsettling. I kept thinking about Father Giuseppe's report from 1962, with its references to time distortion and adverse psychological effects. But I also felt curious about what lay behind the sealed door. Someone had invested considerable effort to access those chambers. What had they found there? What had motivated them to violate decades-old containment protocols? The next morning, I arrived early to find an unfamiliar van parked near the employee entrance. Father Sebastian Cavalieri introduced himself as we gathered in the prep room. He was a tall man in his 40s, dressed in black clerical clothing, but carrying equipment that suggested military or law enforcement background. "The situation requires careful investigation," he explained. "We will document everything we find, but our primary goal is determining whether any security breaches have occurred." 2 other specialists accompanied Father Sebastian. One was introduced as an archaeological expert, the other as a security technician. Both carried sophisticated electronic equipment, along with standard safety gear. we descended to level 3 as a group, with Dr. Marchetti leading navigation. The electric lighting had been restored throughout the accessible areas, making the corridors appear less mysterious than they had during our original visit. But as we approached the sloping passage leading to the opened door, I noticed that the air temperature was dropping significantly. By the time we reached the entrance to the chambers beyond, my breath was visible in small clouds. Father Sebastian recorded the temperature drop with a digital thermometer and made notes in a waterproof notebook. The security technician used various electronic instruments to measure electromagnetic fields and air quality. 18 degrees colder than the main level, Father Sebastian observed, consistent with previous reports from this area. The archaeological expert examined the forced door carefully. The locking mechanisms had indeed been broken with heavy tools, but the damage appeared to be relatively recent. Within the past month, he estimated, the metal shows fresh scoring from cutting equipment. Beyond the door, a new corridor led deeper underground. Unlike the stone construction of the upper levels, this passage appeared to be carved directly from solid rock. The walls were smooth and showed tool marks consistent with ancient Roman excavation techniques. We proceeded slowly, documenting everything with cameras and written notes. The corridor extended for about 100 meters before opening into a large chamber. The chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling rising about 6 meters above the floor. The walls were covered with inscriptions in Latin and what appeared to be older scripts. Stone benches were arranged in concentric circles around a central raised platform. "This looks like an ancient meeting hall," the archaeological expert said. "Possibly pre-Christian, later adapted for religious use. But what drew our attention was the collection of modern equipment that had been installed in the chamber. Electronic monitoring devices, computers, recording equipment, and several items I did not recognize. Father Sebastian photographed everything before approaching the equipment. The computers were still running, their screens displaying data streams and monitoring readouts. "Someone has been conducting systematic research down here," he said. "This equipment represents a significant investment of time and resources." Dr. Marchetti examined the inscriptions on the walls, while the security technician analyzed the electronic equipment. I wandered around the chamber, trying to understand its original purpose. The stone platform in the center bore carved symbols that were unlike anything I had seen in the upper levels. They were not Roman, not Latin, not recognizably Christian. The symbols seemed to form patterns, but I could not determine whether they represented language or purely decorative elements. "Father Sebastian," I called, "you should see this." He joined me at the central platform. "What am I looking at?" "These symbols. They don't match anything from the documented historical periods of Vatican construction." He studied the carvings carefully and made detailed photographs. "You're right. This suggests the chamber predates known Christian use of this site." The archaeological expert overheard our conversation and came to examine the platform. His expression grew puzzled as he studied the symbols. "I've seen similar markings in pre-Roman sites throughout Italy," he said, "but never in association with later Christian construction. It's as if this chamber was preserved from a much earlier period." As we continued exploring, the security technician made an alarming discovery. The monitoring equipment included sensors that had been recording temperature, electromagnetic fields, and seismic activity for several months. "Look at these data patterns," he said, showing us graphs on one of the computer screens. "Regular fluctuations that don't correspond to any known geological phenomena." The temperature readings showed dramatic spikes and drops occurring at precise intervals. The electromagnetic data revealed field strength variations that followed similar patterns. "What could cause such regular variations?" Dr. Marchetti asked. "I don't know," the technician admitted, but someone was clearly studying these phenomena intensively. Father Sebastian reviewed the computer files, looking for information about who had installed the equipment. Most of the data files were labeled with cryptic codes rather than names, but he found several documents that provided clues. The research appears to have been ongoing for at least 8 months, he said. Multiple personnel were involved, but their identities are not clear from these records. One file contained a schedule of visits to the chamber. According to the timestamps, people had been accessing this area several times per week, often during evening hours when the official Crypt division was closed. They were working outside normal Vatican schedules, Father Sebastian observed. This was an unauthorized operation. As we prepared to leave the chamber, I noticed something that made me deeply uncomfortable. One of the monitoring devices was recording audio along with the other environmental data. I approached the device and saw that it had been running continuously for months, capturing every sound in the chamber. A status display showed that the audio files consumed hundreds of hours of storage space. "Father Sebastian," I said quietly, "this equipment has been recording audio for months. Everything that happened in this chamber has been preserved." He examined the audio monitoring system and immediately began copying the data files to portable storage devices. This could provide crucial information about who was accessing this area and what they were doing, he said. But as we gathered our equipment and prepared to return to the surface, I felt increasingly anxious about what those audio recordings might contain. The chamber felt different when I considered that every conversation, every footstep, every sound had been captured and stored. We climbed back through the corridors of Level 3 in relative silence. Each of us seemed lost in consideration of what we had discovered. The unauthorized research operation raised serious questions about Vatican security and the control of sensitive archaeological sites. Back in the prep room, Father Sebastian spent an hour reviewing our photographs and notes. He seemed particularly concerned about the sophisticated nature of the equipment we had found. "This represents a significant security breach," he concluded. "Someone with substantial resources and technical expertise has been conducting unauthorized research in one of our most sensitive locations." "What happens next?" Dr. Marchetti asked. "Full forensic investigation of all equipment and data files. Analysis of the audio recordings to identify personnel involved. Review of security protocols to determine how this operation remained undetected for so long." He gathered his equipment and prepared to leave. "Both of you will likely be contacted for additional interviews as the investigation progresses. In the meantime, Level 3 remains completely off-limits." That afternoon, as Dr. Marchetti and I returned to our surface duties, I could not stop thinking about the chamber beyond the sealed door. Someone had invested enormous effort to study whatever phenomena occurred in that ancient space. But what had they discovered? What did the mysterious data patterns represent? And why had they felt the need to work in secret, violating containment protocols that had been in place for decades? Most troubling of all was a question I could not shake. If the researchers had discovered something significant in that chamber, where were they now? The equipment was still running, the computers still recording data, but no one had been present when we arrived. It was as if the researchers had simply disappeared, leaving behind only their monitoring equipment and months of mysterious data documenting phenomena that had no obvious explanation. As we worked in the familiar spaces of the main basilica, surrounded by tourists and normal activity, the underground chambers felt like memories from a different world. But I knew that Father Sebastian's investigation would eventually reveal the truth about what had been happening in those ancient spaces, and I was not entirely certain I wanted to know what that truth might be.